Good morning, Abundant Life Church. This is Pastor Chris. Today we're going to continue our look at John chapter 10, verses 1 down through 21. We've been talking about the idea that Jesus calls himself the Good Shepherd. We're the sheep. Calls the Pharisees the thieves trying to break in and hurt the sheep. But the Pharisees don't get this. They don't understand what he's talking about. Why not? What was tripping them up? Remember the old Mary Tyler Moore show? There was a great episode where Ted Baxter, everybody's favorite character, and his wife, Georgette, I think they had adopted a kid or something like that, and the kid was having trouble in school. He wasn't doing well academically. And so they couldn't figure out what was the problem. There was somebody, I don't remember who this guy was. It was an older man. He just happened to be there, and he said, Can I give you some advice from an old man who has seen a lot of things and learned a lot of things? They said, yeah. And he said, well, maybe your kid's just stupid. Could it be that the Pharisees were not that smart? That's why they weren't getting this? We'd like to think that because it would make them even easier to dislike and even bigger buffoons than we already think they are. But these are educated men. These guys, they know their way around a metaphor. Even when Jesus used metaphors to insult them, they picked up on that. But not this time. Again, these are not stupid men by any means, but they're still, for some reason, missing his metaphor. Well, was the metaphor just too complicated for them? No, it's not a complicated metaphor. We use the metaphor of Jesus as a shepherd and us as sheep. We teach children with that metaphor. We teach them about Jesus with sheep and shepherds. No, there's something else that was blocking their understanding. There's some mental roadblock that they had over this particular imagery of a shepherd. So what was their problem with shepherds that was making this imagery so hard for them to grasp? To see what they were struggling with, we have to take into context or into consideration the cultural context at that time. All right, what was the reputation of shepherds? Oh, shepherds have a good reputation. I mean, we name churches the Good Shepherd. We name hospitals Good Shepherd. Shepherds, those are good guys. Yes, today they have a good reputation. Back then, they did not. Back then, they were not considered clean. They were not considered worthy Jews. They were cut off from the people. They couldn't go into the synagogue. They couldn't go to the temple. Why not? One very simple reason. What was the most important commandment in Jewish life? Honor the Sabbath. Shepherds could not keep the Sabbath. The answer is obvious. They couldn't just say to the sheep, okay, guys, I'm going to be gone for 24 hours. Don't wander off and don't get eaten. No, they had to stay with the shepherds. So shepherds, because they can't keep the Sabbath, and because they chose that reputation, are seen as people who are choosing to be cut off from God. And you can see now why Jesus comparing himself to a shepherd would be confusing. Why would he use such horrible men to describe himself? Men who choose to walk away from God. That doesn't make any sense. Okay, so we got what confused them with this metaphor. But wait a minute. The Old Testament is full of references to God being our shepherd. Wasn't David a shepherd? Why were shepherds adored in the Old Testament, but by this time they were despised? The answer is the same. They couldn't keep the Sabbath. But even though they couldn't, God loved them. God picked one of them to be the king and the ancestor of the Messiah. Yeah, but the shepherds, or excuse me, the Pharisees by this time, by Jesus's time, even though shepherds had a fairly good reputation in the Old Testament, by Jesus's time they didn't, because over the years, the religious leaders had added so many rules and regulations as to what it meant to keep the Sabbath. You can't travel this far on the Sabbath. You can't leave home on the Sabbath. You can't carry a burden on the Sabbath. They even argued about if you're walking past a table on the Sabbath and you brush your hand on the table accidentally, you get a splinter in it. Can you pull it out? And some argued no, you can't because that's work pulling it out. But others argued, but you're carrying an extra burden. And they went back and forth on this. They had all these rules and regulations. It was ridiculous, and they missed the intention of the Sabbath to honor God. Now, here's why this is so important. These guys who had lost the meaning of the Sabbath because they were so tied up in the regulations, these are supposed to be the shepherds. These are supposed to be the guys who are pointing people towards the Lord. Here's our real question. What kind of spiritual leaders would these guys be? It sounds like they'd be pretty blind, which is exactly what Jesus was trying to show them. We'll talk more about this next time. Till then, have a great day.